أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي ربي يسر ولا تؤسر وتمم بالخير اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل حسنا إذا شئت سهلا اللهم انفعني بما علمتني وعلمني ما ينفعني وزدني علما آمين يا رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum. So today we will be starting from verse 120. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن تمسسكم حسنة تسؤهم وإن تصبكم سيئة يفرحوا بها وإن تصبروا وتتقوا لا يضركم كيدهم شيئا إن الله بما يعملون محيط. If if any good happens to you, it grieves them, and if any misfortune befalls you, they rejoice at it. And if you are patient and fear Allah, their plot will not harm you at all. Surely Allah is surrounding that which they do. So Allah is showing us in this ayah that the disbelievers hate that any good may come to the Muslims in any way. They rejoice and become happy to see you suffer in the least. Allah gives us the remedy to deal with this attitude that we can see from the disbelievers. This remedy is patience and taking the necessary precautions to ensure we gain the pleasure of Allah and stay away from angering Him. If we do this, Allah ensures us that He will deal with them and they won't harm us in the least. So Allah is basically saying that every time something good happens to us, the disbelievers, they become mad, they become angry, and every time something bad happens to us, they become happy, they rejoice in our suffering. So Allah is basically saying that if you want to, not face this attitude, and if you want to be saved from it, then you need to be patient and you need to fear Allah. And when we fear Allah, what do we do? When we fear Allah, we, worship Him and we do not do sins and we stay away from evil. So Allah is basically asking us to do all of that. And then Allah is saying that if you do everything that I have asked you to do, and if you worship me and if you fear me, then that their plot will not harm you, because the disbelievers always have a plot against the Muslims that, since the beginning of time, they've always tried to harm us. They've always tried to, somehow prosecute us, or somehow try to stop our religion. So Allah is basically saying that if you remain patient and if you fear Allah, their plot will not harm you, and surely Allah is surrounding that which they do. So Allah knows what they're doing and Allah will protect you. The next ayah, وَإِذْ غَدَوْتَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ تُبَوِّئُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ مَقَاعِدَ لِلْقِتَالِ وَاللَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. And when you, O Muhammad, left your household at daybreak to assign to the believers the positions for the battle, and Allah is all here, all knowing. So this ayah is the beginning part of the commentary on the Battle of Uhud. So غدوتا comes from the word غدا, which means in the later part of the next morning. Coming from the verb is the noun ghadan, which is commonly translated as tomorrow. More precisely, it should be translated as the later part of the next morning. The word tubawwa'u comes from the word bawwa'a, which means to settle somebody exactly where you want them to. Tabawwa'a is to move to a place exactly where you want. And maqa'id is the plural of maqa'idun, which means the place of sitting. The noun comes from the verb qa'ida, to sit. So Allah is basically saying that, oh Muhammad, do you remember when you left your household early in the morning, very, very early? And then Allah is basically saying that you left it. And then why did you leave it? You left it so that you could assign the believers for the battle. So in the Battle of Uhud, most commonly we know that there were 50 archers under the command of Abdullah bin Jubair on Mount Uhud, right? And we know that they, like in every battle, there is a front rank and there's a back rank, and then there is a front rear and a back rear, and then there's the left and right ranks as well. So Prophet Muhammad sallallahu he was basically arranging everything because he was the commander of the army, right? So he was saying, okay, 50 people go here, 60 people go here, for example. So he was basically arranging people in the battlefield for the battle, and he was preparing them. So Allah is basically reminding Muhammad sallallahu of this. The next verse is hammat ta'ifatani minkum an tafshala wallahu waliyuhuma wa ala Allahi falyatawakkalul mu'minin. When two parties among you were about to lose courage, and Allah was their protecting friend, and upon Allah let the believers put their trust. So hammat comes from the word hamma, which means to think about something for a long time, something you have been waiting to do for a long time but haven't had the chance to do. So here there are two groups, Banu Haritha and Banu Salama. They were thinking about running off. Tafshala comes from the root fashila, which means to be disheartened or to lose motivation. It's like the feeling we're experiencing when we say the wind has been taken out of my sails. In modern Arabic, it means that to fail. So basically, Allah is like, reminding us that remember when two parties from amongst the believers, there were two parties, and these two parties were Banu Haritha and Banu Salama. So Allah is basically saying that, remember when these two parties, they were about to lose heart. So what do we say when we what do we mean when we say to lose heart? Like to lose motivation, because we know that the Muslims, they were in it originally 1,000, right? And then Abdullah bin Ubay bin Sulul and the hypocrites, they took back 300 people, and there were only 700 left. There's obviously like a more detailed version of Battle of Uhud, but I'm not going to go into it. So basically, they had already lost 300 people, and there were only 700, while their enemy was 3,000 people, and they had cavalry, and they had women reciting provocative poems, and it was a very difficult environment. So Banu Harith and Banu Salama, they lost heart, they lost motivation. They were just like, they were about to run off. So Allah is basically saying that in that position, when they felt afraid, when they felt demotivated, when they felt like they were going to, lose, Allah was their protector. Allah was their wali. And basically, Allah helped them by, by, how He sends angels. And He, like, also put, like, good feelings in their hearts, because Allah can control the hearts. So Allah was basically their supporter, and Allah protected them. And in Allah should the believers put their trust, is basically like, in only Allah do we, like, believe that He can do something for us. Allah is the only one who we can think that, okay, He is the only one who is capable of supporting and protecting us. And that's why we can only put our sole trust in Allah alone, because He's the only one who can protect us. The next verse, وَلَقَدْ نَصَرَكُمْ نَصَرَكُمُ اللَّهُ بَبَدْرٍ وَأَنْتُمْ أَذِلَّةٌ فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَشْكُرُونَ. And Allah had already given you the victory at Badr while you were weak, so fear Allah that you may be grateful. So Nasrun means aid for military purposes and for huge circumstances. Azillata is the plural of the word zilla, which means weakness, powerlessness, and Thalun is a weak, decaminated animal. So Allah is basically saying that, in the Battle of Badr, we know that the enemies were 1,300 and the Muslims were only 313, and they barely had any horses and camels. They had like a very, very small number of army and military, right? Which is Nasarun in Arabic. So they had a very small army, and the opponents, obviously, it was the first battle. Abu Jahl had a huge army and everything, and it was very difficult for them to win, but Allah still made them win through His help, right? So Allah is basically saying that, fear me, because you were such a small batch. You were so weak. There was no chance that you could win. There were so many doubts in people, but I still made you win. So, when we say that in like general terms, when we say, this seems impossible, how did you do it? We're usually saying that the person is very powerful, because in our mind, something that seems impossible was possible for them. So we can say, maybe getting 100 on a test, we say that this was impossible, how did you do it? That means the other person is very smart, the other person is very knowledgeable, and that's why they were about to get that 100 in a test. So if Allah did such a huge miracle, if Allah made a small band of Muslims win against a huge army, then we need to think about how powerful He must be, how much power, how much authority He has, that He can easily make, such a small army win against such a huge one. So Allah is basically asking us to fear Him. And again, when we say fear, we mean to, abstain from all kinds of sins and evil deeds which He has forbidden, and love Allah and perform all kinds of good deeds which He has ordained for us. So Allah is basically saying that, I made you win, and that was really hard. So you fear me, and you should be grateful. So we should, be happy that, okay, Allah, made us win. And then, because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Battle of Badr, he was very afraid. And the day before, like in the morning of the battle, he spoke to Allah, and he made dua, and he was like, if this little band of Muslims is perished today, there will be no one on earth to worship you. So we should be grateful that those people survived, because if they didn't, then Islam wouldn't have come forward, and we wouldn't have been Muslims, and we would have been arrogant as well. We would have lived in the way of the Jahilun. So we should be grateful that Allah made them win, and they should also be grateful that Allah made them win. The next verse is تقولوا للمؤمنين ألن يكفيكم أن يمدكم ربكم بثلاثة آلاف من الملائكة منزلين. When you said to the believers, it is not sufficient for you that your Lord should support you with 3,000 angels sent down. So in this words, yumiddakum comes from the word amad, which means to stretch, extend, or extend something for someone. Munzalina, originally from the word munziluna, comes from the verb anzala, which means to send something down all at once. So basically, the prophet, Allah is basically saying that was it not sufficient for you? Was it not enough for you that I, your Lord, sent 3,000 angels to protect you and support you? So Allah basically, to help the Muslims in the battle, He sent 3,000 angels to assist them, right? Because the Muslims were only 700 and the opposing side was 3,000. So if you can add like 3,000 to the Muslim side, then that's 2,700. So not only did they have a numerical advantage with the angels, they also had the blessings of Allah and everything. So Allah is basically saying that was it not enough for you that your Lord, that your guardian sent 3,000 angels to protect you and to help you, and He sent them down directly from heaven. So this is just to tell us that Allah did help His believers because they put trust in Him. The next verse, بَلَا إِن تَصْبِرُوا وَتَتَّقُوا وَيَأْتُوكُم مِّن فَوْرِهِمْ هَذَا يُمْدِكُمْ رَبُّكُم بِخَمْسَةِ آلَافٍ مِّنَ الْمَلَائِكَةِ مُسَوِّمِينَ. Nay, but if you are patient and fear Allah, and the enemy come to you suddenly, your Lord will help you with 5,000 angels having marks of distinction. So, yeah, okay. So, ya'tukum comes from the verb ata, which means to come. However, in this context, it means to attack someone or to come at someone. And min fawrihim is at this very instant. So when we say min fawrihim, we mean okay, right now, like right this instant. And the word musawwimin is someone who rides a branded horse. The word comes from the word sawwama, which means to brand. Its verbal noun is taswimun. So here Allah is saying that He will send angels who are equipped for battle. Some argue the word musawwimun in this ayah means that the angels have branded who they're going to kill and attack. They will see a mark on that individual and go after them. So obviously, different scholars have different interpretations, but one interpretation basically says that when we say these angels these angels had branded horses, we can say that okay, they knew who they're gonna kill. So for example, if Angel X knows that I have to kill someone with the purple mark and Abu Jahl had that purple mark, so then they will kill the person with the purple mark, which would be Abu Jahl. This is just an example. This is not what actually happened. So that's just how one interpretation goes for, and the other interpretation is it can have different ones, but basically what the general idea is that if you're patient and if you fear Allah, then the enemy can come at you suddenly. For example, if the battle has subsided and then the enemy suddenly attacks the Muslims, and Allah is saying that if they suddenly attack you, then I will send 5,000 angels with markers, with distinctions, so that they can protect and help you. So Allah is basically promising His support if the Muslims, fear Allah and if they are patient. The next verse, وَمَا جَعَلَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بُشْرَى لَكُمْ وَلِتَطْمَئِنَّ قُلُوبُكُمْ بِهِ وَمَا النَّصْرُ إِلَّا مِنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ الْعَزِيزِ الْحَكِيمِ. And Allah did not make it but as a good tidings for you, and that your hearts might be reassured thereby. And there is no victory except from Allah, the Almighty, the All-Wise. So in this verse, the word min indillah means especially coming from Allah. So Allah is saying that this. I'm sorry, just one second. Yes, okay. So Allah is basically saying that this is good news for you. This is assurance for you. What I'm telling you right now is assurance. Okay, it's good news. Now, when we say that it is not only a good news but also an assurance, it basically means that Allah was giving them good news that okay, the angels might come to protect you, but that it wasn't just only supposed to be good news. It just wasn't supposed to give them a moment of happiness, right? That okay, yay, people are gonna angels are gonna come help us. It's also supposed to assure them in their hearts. So Allah knew that these people needed assurance. They knew that the people at Uhud, they had fear in their hearts, which was natural. The believers, even though they're supposed to fear Allah and put their trust in Him, it is a natural emotion for people to feel fear when in a dangerous situation. So Allah knew that. That's why Allah sent this information. That's why Allah sent down this verse, so that they could be reassured from their heart that okay, Allah is protecting us. Allah is there for us. He's got our back. So that's basically the reason Allah sent down that verse. And Allah is basically saying that there is no victory except from Allah, the Almighty, the All-Wise, that even if the disbelievers win, they won't exactly win, because the only victory that's truly fruitful, the only victory that's actually a victory, is if you win for the sake of Allah. And Allah is mentioning that He is the Almighty, the All-Wise. The next verse, ليقطع طرفا من الذين كفروا أو يكبتكم فينقلبوا خائبين, that he might cut off a section of those who disbelieve or suppress them so that they turn back frustrated. So in this verse, tarafan means a side, or it can mean sight. So it can either mean a side, so believers or disbelievers, or it can also mean the ability to see things, the ability to like visualize things, sight. Then the next word is yakbitahum, comes from the word kabata, which means to insult or humiliate someone and send them away. And khaibina basically means deprived. So Allah is saying that, I might cut off a piece of a part of those who disbelieve. So I might cut off their hands, I might cut off their legs, whatever, or I can expose them to infamy. Now, what is infamy? Infamy could mean that, if, for example, sometimes we know that some people are famous for doing bad deeds. So maybe a famous criminal could be, very famous for doing for doing robberies. So Allah is saying that I will either cut off a part of them, or I will expose them in a way that everyone knows that they're someone who, are bad, and then they will retire frustrated. So if, for example, if a person is like suddenly known for being a very bad person, they'll get frustrated. They'll be like, why am I being exposed? Why are my bad deeds being exposed? And they will get frustrated. And Allah is basically saying that he might do that, or he might cut them off, and then they can retire frustrated so that they can go back to Makkah being in a frustrated manner. The next verse, ليس لك من الأمر شيء أو يتوب عليهم أو يعذبهم فإنهم ظالمون. Not for you at all, O Muhammad, but for Allah is the decision whether he should forgive them or punish them, then indeed they are the wrongdoers. So in this verse, ليس لك من الأمر شيء, you have absolutely no authority in your possession that all in any way, shape, or form. Here we see that Allah is correcting his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We can take from this a number of things. One of them being the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a slave of Allah. He sallallahu alaihi wasallam is far above us in terms of his status with Allah. However, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a slave of Allah in the end. At the end of the day, he's only a slave of Allah, and Allah has the authority to correct his messenger when he sees fit. Another point to mention is that this is another thing that shows that the Messenger ﷺ is not the author of the Holy Quran and is a rebuttal to those who claim this. So because this is Allah basically correcting his messenger. If the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ did write the Quran, why would he correct himself through a book? He could just correct himself generally. So that negates the false belief that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ wrote the Quran. And this verse is basically Allah telling the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that you do not have any authority to decide the state or the fate of the believers. So I can decide if I want to punish them, or I can decide if I want to forgive them. Allah is saying that is solely his decision, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ does not have a say in it. So Allah is basically correcting his messenger. He's basically telling him, you are my messenger, but you're still, at the end of the day, you're just my slave, and the absolute power of authority is in my hands. So I will decide what's going to happen. The next verse, وَلِلَّهِ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ يَغْفِرُ لِمَن يَشَاءُ وَيُعَذِّبُ مَن يَشَاءُ وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. And to Allah belong whatever is in the heavens and whatever is on the earth. He forgives whom he wills and punishes whom he wills, and Allah is also most merciful. So ghafirun, this is a hyperbolized noun meaning exceedingly and extremely forgiving. So in English, we use a hyperbole when we want to exaggerate something, when we want to show something as, extensive. So if we can use a hyperbole to say something is very large, then that would mean it is huge. It is absolutely huge because we're using a hyperbole. We're supposed to exaggerate it. So in this one, ghafirun is a hyperbolized noun. It's a very exaggerated noun. This means that Allah, and it's basically referring to Allah's forgiveness, right? So now we need to think about that. Allah's forgiveness is huge. It is extreme. It's it's so big that we can't even imagine it. That's how forgiving Allah is. Rahim is an adjective, and it implies that Allah is always merciful. Allah's mercy is constant for his forgiveness. Allah's mercy is constant. Allah will always be merciful. However, he might not always forgive. So we know shirk is an unforgivable sin, right? So he might not forgive that, but he might still be merciful to the to the person that did it. So Allah's mercy is constant, but his forgiveness is not. This ayah comes after Allah corrected his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah is showing his messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he is not to worry because Allah is exceedingly forgiving and always merciful. So this is a very famous thing that a lot of people know, that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to cry for the believers. He used to be very upset, and he used to be like, I want the best for my ummah. So Allah is basically saying, in the previous verse, Allah is telling him that whatever I do with the believers or disbelievers, that's my call. And now Allah is saying, but don't worry, that's not like, that doesn't mean I'm going to punish your ummah or like the disbelievers or something. I am the most forgiving, I am the most merciful. So if I believe that they should be forgiven, then I will forgive them. And Allah will remain merciful throughout, even if He might not always forgive the person. And this basically again shows that Allah, its authority is universal, because everything that is in the heavens, everything that is in the earth, and everything that is in between belongs to Allah. He is the creator of everything, and He has the perfect authority to do whatever He wants. He can punish someone or forgive someone based on His will. That's it. Does anyone have anything to add?
I don't. You explained
Then you
good.
can. Thank you.
Does anyone
Then you
else?
can. Okay.
You were saying something?
No, I was just saying you can share the opening, like closing dua.
Yeah, just here.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم سبحان ربك رب العزة أما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Jazakallah.